Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Damn Parenting, your English-speaking parenting podcast from Amsterdam. And we are back on this week with Dr. Naomi Gibson, the Good Enough psychologist. And we were talking about a vague and interesting topic because we were talking about mental health with parents. So we were exploring we had an explorational conversation about general mental health and how we took care of our mental health before we became parents, and then how the whole situation basically changed when you become parents and how you can navigate this time better, and also what are the shifts that you might need to do when taking care of your mental health, because there are different relationships now, there are different focuses now, there are different roles and identifications, and maybe the patterns that you have used in the past or the things that you have done in the past to take care of yourself and take care of your mental health might not work anymore now that you're a parent, because you might not have the resources or the time or the energy. And so we had an open conversation with Dr. Naomi Gibson about this topic, how we can navigate and change our behavior towards our mental health, and how we can take care of us when we become parents, and how we might need to change some things or be aware. It's a little bit of a more unstructured and looser conversation because we don't have the golden rule. We don't have the golden key. Neither has Dr. Naomi Gibson, because she doesn't know any of you individually. So we are talking in general about this topic, and hopefully you can fall into the flow with us. And it kind of felt like having a map with a lot of white spots on it. And we were trying to fill these white spots in our landscape and in our map within. And hopefully this is going to be not too unstructured and crazy for you. And we hope you enjoy this episode with us.
And we are here with Dr. Naomi Gibson. Hi, Naomi.
Hello.
Hi. So this episode is about the parental mental health. Can we just first start off with, what is the difference between a parent's mental health versus an adult without kids?
Yeah, and it's not a whole lot of difference, really. Just that when you're thinking about how you look after your mental health, as a parent, you're thinking about your extra role as a parent and looking after children and being responsible, and the challenges of existing in a parenting team, and all those things can put extra pressure on your mental health.
That sounds like a lot of pressure, what you've just named, in fairness.
Yeah, I think we'd all experience it that way, right? There's lots of stresses, internal and external, on our well-being when we become parents.
Yeah, it's the whole thing of when I'm in conversation with my partner, I can give them some responsibility for their mental health or for their actions, but I can't put this on my child because they don't know. I'm responsible for their mental well-being because they cannot be responsible for it themselves. And I also need to provide the tools for them to hopefully establish a good mental health and the tools to keep a good mental health intact. And I guess this is then what I don't necessarily should have to do with my partner. But sometimes we then unravel, I also have to do this. And I guess this is then when frustration can come into play, when we think they're 30 plus years old, 40 plus years old, maybe they should be having figured this out by now. And if not, then is it also my responsibility now? No, because I have to also care for someone else now who I still have to form and still have to equip with all of that.
Yeah.
So when you're saying that, I actually was just thinking it's that thing of when you become a parent, and just like you were saying, it's like we're having to try and teach our little ones, how to also develop their emotional wellness and their own mental health. Is we're basically trying to regulate ourselves because we are so overwhelmed with life in general. The house is clean. Are our kids eating? Do they sleep? How's my job? How's my partner? Are we paying the bills? All the rest of that kind of stuff. And the fact that, for me anyway, I keep having to come back to regulate that when my little kid kicks off, I have to really take a deep breath. But then when I notice when we're all together, it's kind of hard. I don't know. I find it sometimes that you're witnessing the other partner and you have the same expectations of them to manage themselves as you expect yourself. And I'm working so hard to make sure I'm regulating myself and to be there as a support for my child while they develop. But my partner, sometimes it's kind of more overwhelming because I'm the primary carer, I guess. And so you're kind of looking at them to kind of say, don't forget to regulate your emotions, and you have to be the reminder to them to be like, you're in charge of your emotions. Like our little one is not in charge of their emotions. They're still figuring it out. But, and then I can kind of get a little mad that I'm like, why aren't you regulating yourself? Like, I'm doing my best. Why aren't you? And so I don't know where I'm going with this. It's just that thing that I just feel like, yeah, you have a great expectation of your partner to be able to do what you're doing and you're working on. And then that can cause a little friction, I guess.
Yeah. And that friction, it can come out in those moments of friction, but it also could come out in kind of conversations about your expectations of them. Like, how do we manage it when they have a tantrum and you feel so flooded with rage and annoyance? What do we do as a team? How do we look after ourselves while looking after your little one? And that's really hard. And I think, yeah, when we're talking about parental mental health, those are the kind of challenges we're thinking about. Like, how do you best help yourself so that you can help your children grow and thrive?
Speaking as an individual, first off, how do we take care of our mental health?
Yeah. So it's a very
$1 million question.
Yeah.
No pressure.
Yeah. Lots of different ways, right? There's keeping an eye on your boundaries, the things that are important to you emotionally, and, letting other people close to you know those, what to expect. Things like work stress or lack of work, or, work in the home. All of these things add to a feeling of being overwhelmed. Or so how do you look after yourself? So what can you do yourself? What can you do internally to manage that? What can you do externally? What kind of communications you need to give to other people around you? Things like breathing, grounding yourself, eating regularly. Those basics that we've spoken about before are fundamental basics in looking after your mental health. Moving your body, taking control of the things that you can control and losing the things that you can't. So, thinking about a toddler having a tantrum, you can't control that. You shouldn't control that. That's a natural, normal part, but it still feels very overwhelming. And if you're having a whole day or week of tantrums, that can feel like it really grinds you to the ground. So you can't control that, but what can you control? You can control yourself in the moment. Hopefully try and take some deep breaths and ground yourself and remind yourself you're safe. You could have a bath in the evening. You can connect with a friend. You can do these sort of things that help you to kind of regulate your mental health during challenging times.
What I find is also super important, and at least that was super helpful for me, that I really make an effort to pay attention to my verbal communication, and that I educate myself about this. And I think this is one of the biggest learnings that I took away to, can I really go out and see, are there any other ways of communicating? Is there like any communication plan I can follow? So is there anything that I can really educate myself about? So I'm a big advocate of nonviolent communication. So I really looked down on this concept and thought, what are the steps? And really like training yourself in good communication skills. And that has helped me so much in communicating my needs, in communicating my wishes. And it has really shifted the dynamics, because it's like we get into these conversations, or then they end up in a fight, and we hit the same roadblock again and again and again. And then of course, yeah, you can then take care of yourself to regulate. But I thought, how can we overcome this freaking block? Because I felt like I hit the block, and then I go in myself and I regulate myself, and then I do all this work with me. But then if I don't do the work in the outside with me speaking, then I'm going to hit the same block again. And then I can go back, do my breathing, do my bath. And then next day, boom, I'm going to go into the same crash. So that's really one thing that I have learned, it helped me to really educate myself on communication. And is there anything that I can follow, any rules, communication rules or models? And this is, yeah, of course, then therapy and couples therapy comes into this, like a whole big other topic then. But this is something that everyone can do, like how to better communicate, type it into Google. It's going to be stuff popping up that you have to read on. And it's really one thing that you get along in your life, and you kind of like, oh yeah, I can get away with this. I can get away with this. But then at one point, I really felt like I cannot get away with this anymore. And I really have to follow steps until I internalize them and really change my way of communicating. And that has helped me so much with my mental health because I was able to really communicate what I wanted to say.
Yeah, and communication within couples is crucial
Yeah.
to mental health generally. How do you have conflict well? How do
Yeah.
you manage times when you're feeling unheard or there's something coming up from your past that feels challenging or threatening to the relationship, or there's something in the way that your child has needs that feel overwhelming? So finding ways to communicate that as a couple can be really, really helpful for mental health.
One thing that I also found challenging, or yeah, I don't even know how I really found it, but when you're a couple, then technically you can always just turn around and go, right? Because you're responsible for yourself and there's nothing that holds you together, I guess. But then you have this, maybe a pet, that would be one thing, but now you have this child and this back door is kind of shut, or at least very hard to open. And this is something that I also found is another layer of we have to make it work, or I'm trying to do my best to make it work. And because I will always be connected with this person and it's not so easy to leave, you know? So it really pushes you to really work on stuff because yeah, in my 20s, I was like, oh, this doesn't vibe with me. See ya. But I can't. I tried not to do this with my husband. So this is, I think, also a layer. But then, of course, then also the dependencies just have changed. And this is a bigger layer because you have to put in an extra effort of, I really want to make this work. So I really want to work through the itty bitty variety stuff because I know it's worth it and we're the family and this is what I have worked for so hard and this is what I want and how can we make this work other than I'm out of here, I can't do this.
Yeah, and regardless, even if the relationship itself breaks down, you're still always in a co-parenting relationship with somebody. And so finding ways to communicate how you're feeling or what you need are really, it's really important. Yeah, just thinking about sort of communication, ways to communicate that can help. You know, it sounds like nonviolent communication has been really useful for you, Maren, finding some ways through that. But there's Dan Siegel, who's a psychologist, talks about connection before correction. So if there's things that feel hard, and this works with children, I think it actually might have come through sort of parent-child literature, but I find it really helpful in relationships as well. Like, how can we connect before I correct? So, you know, it might be that somebody's not doing the dishwasher correctly or something, to go in there full throttle and say like, oh, why have you put the plate there again? I've told you, is just going to get an immediate defensive response. You don't feel connected, you don't feel heard. But if there are ways to kind of be like, connect first. Hey, I know we've spoken about this before. I know you're trying and you're also busy, but I need the plate to go there. It washes it better, that sort of thing. So that's a silly example, but find ways that you can connect first before correct. And we can get into our rhythms of just correcting first. And especially if you're tired, you're overwhelmed, you're struggling with, you know, stress, more kind of acute mental health conditions, you know, finding ways to communicate that feels fair and proportionate can be really, really difficult, but to try.
And keep trying, because that's also the big thing, that when it's every time you try is the thing, you know, because you need to try these new ways of communicating and you need to try these new ways of be in connection, right? And then it's like sometimes you forget, but then every situation is a new chance to practice, I guess. And this is what I've also learned, is that communication is not something that you read it and then you've implemented it and then you've executed it. But it's like you read it, you practice, you fail, you practice again, you go back to rereading it because, I think I don't have gathered this correctly. So it's like this whole in the loop of going back, trying again, going back, correcting. And this is what can be draining, I guess. And then I also got frustrated with myself because I was like, why can't I just get this right? But then, of course, you said, I'm tired, I'm overstimulated, like all these other factors play into role. And I'm not always starting from my best starting point. And but then it's this resilience of, all right, I didn't do it this time, but next time I try to remind myself to step back, connect, and then speak.
Yeah, and there will always be moments that you miss the mark as well, and that's kind of okay, and to have some generosity in mind as well. And I often talk to couples in therapy about the sort of big and small gestures of communication. Like, it can often feel like when you're parenting that there's a sort of, I don't know, a trope that you need to go for date nights and stuff like that. And sure, they're really nice, but often it's actually like saying hello to each other when you come in the door, or good night, or really asking how somebody's day was. And yeah, I know I find that challenging, where I come in from a busy day, I've got 2 small children immediately needing a snack and attention and whatever, to sort of ignore my partner, or to think, oh, he's okay, he's resilient, because he is. But actually, we are a parenting team and we're a couple, and can I take a moment to give him a hug and say, hey, how you doing? How was your day? Yeah, you're all right. Oh, a bit stressed. Okay, cool. Let's check in later. I'm going to go to get the snacks now. You know, whatever that looks like in your individual families, but those little gestures of communication and generosity and connection are really really fundamental as well.
Can I ask you, as a therapist, do you do the whole 5 love languages?
It's not an evidence-based way of thinking about relationships, but it is helpful, and people often have looked into that themselves. So yeah, I think it's a helpful way of knowing, you know, if somebody needs words, but somebody else needs acts of service or whatever, to kind of, I kind of feel like whatever's the shorthand to feeling connected, if it helps you to know that about the other person, then yeah, go for it. It's useful. Do you like it have you done that in your own relationship then?
It was actually, I think it was my sister-in-law, probably like, I don't know, 8 years ago or something. She told us about it, and we were in her house, and she was like, oh, I'm going to do it on you guys. And so myself and my husband were like, okay. And then we wrote down, and it turns out we both are, I think it was quality time was the one we have. Both of us had it. And that's actually the truth. And we were kind of like, yeah, that's all we do, is like, that's all we ever wanted to do, is to have quality time, be it going on trips or just hanging out or whatever it was. But it now resonates, like, as a couple with a child, it also resonates that like time is really limited, super limited when you have a child. And so it really was paramount to be like, coming back to that for us, that it was like, oh, even to sit down, like we haven't, like, our child's over 3, we haven't sat down to watch a movie since pre-COVID, for example. We barely even got to sit down and watch a TV show in the last 3 years. This is how we have been, and it's a case of, oh, we really need to get back to that. Now, it's probably because there's no good TV out there, but you know, I'm just saying, that's one of the things for us that I really was reflecting on, kind of like, oh yeah, that is what we want. We don't want gifts. We don't need to tell each other we love each other. We don't need that affirmation or anything like that. It really is just down to time and really being in the moment.
I was just thinking of that. I think like that you're both aware of it is the important thing. And then you can kind of come back to that as a guiding light. Like, how can we get some quality time? What does that look like in this season of our lives right now? It probably doesn't look like a long holiday, just the 2 of you. It probably looks like intentionally sitting down in the same place and watching some TV, but to be kind of clear about it can be helpful.
Yeah, one thing that I've also done is that I've sat down and identified for myself, how do I show love to the people that I love? And my big thing is food and touch. So I've communicated this with my husband and said, you know, my love language is food and comfort. So if you see me cracking up those crazy dinners, you know, I love you so much. And he has recognized this because he knows this about me. He knows Martin likes to feed people and Martin likes to hug people. So if I'm doing, he recognizes this and he sees this, and then he sees, okay, she's really trying to connect here. And I know that but yeah, I had to communicate this because when I put out a crazy roast dinner, if I don't communicate that this is my love language, then he's like eating it and it's like, was good. Yeah. But now he really knows that, oh, this was a great dinner. And he really like then compliments me on it and makes me feel like he sees this. And also when we hug each other, or we like, it's not, or I put my foot on his foot and he's like, oh, this is like a little connection. So that has helped me to communicate what my love language is, and for him to recognize it.
Yeah, and thinking about your mental health then as a couple, if you have these moments of connection or understanding each other, it then makes it far more possible to face the challenges, be it external stress, elderly, unwell parents, children ill, whatever the life stress is. If you feel like you are in a team, that's really important. And that doesn't necessarily mean to be a team that is like a romantic team. It could be a co-parenting team or whoever's helping you with your looking after your child. If you feel like you kind of understand each other and you can communicate, that's really important for facing those stresses that will inevitably happen in one way or another. There will be stress in life.
So speaking of these stresses, can you help us think about what should we look out for in ourselves and also in our partners, like as a check-in to be kind of, to keep an eye on both of our mental health?
Yeah, those things that we were talking about before, like checking in with each other, actually having moments where you can listen to somebody talk about their day or the conflict they're having with somebody at work or, whatever it is. So having moments where you can be seen, feel seen, and listen and feel heard, and that's kind of reciprocal is really important. And with that, I guess you're the person that knows your partner best, probably noticing when they might not be themselves or when they seem overwhelmed, or perhaps they're, using drugs and alcohol and smoking and things like that in a way they haven't before, like trying, different coping mechanisms that might be slightly more unhealthy. If there's things more like that more around, that need to be spoken about. When people seem to, thinking about low mood, it's often if somebody just has a persistent feeling of sadness, or they might be irritable or angry more. They might have problems sleeping at night. I mean, I know that sleep is not easy to come by in early parenthood anyway, but when things feel really hard to get sleep and rest, that might be something you look out for. It's nuanced, right? So knowing your partner well and inviting conversations so that you can be open with each other, which particularly when we think about parental mental health, that can be extra challenging because there can be a feeling that you're not fulfilling your role as a parent if you're having mental health struggles, that you might, literally be a bit absent if you're having to work a lot or you're overwhelmed with that, or you might feel a bit absent if you're low in mood, or to invite the conversation and say, like, this isn't a comment on you as a bad mom, dad, whoever. This is just as a person. Let's talk about this. How are you feeling? What do we need to do as a family to make things easier? And that could also involve professional help as well. Therapy, couples therapy, speaking to your GP, going to a boxing club, however you need to manage it.
One thing that I also found very helpful is giving the other person really space for themselves. Because one thing that I have noticed, we have so little time and we're so busy. So the free time that we have, sometimes the impulse is we have to do it as a family. Like now we have to spend quality time with the family of us. But then where's the time where I do get to do something on my own, alone, that makes me happy? The gym class you mentioned, but then equally with my husband, like I have to give him the time to be himself alone without me and the child, and really give him the space to, if he wants to watch Formula One race and he says, I need the 2 hours, then I'll take the child out of the home and I'll leave and give him this 2 hours peace at home. Because that's also this whole, when do you really have your home to yourself and just do whatever you want? And I feel my husband has very little of that because he works from home. I'm always there, or the child is always there. And I'm like, when does he ever get to enjoy just sitting on the couch, not having to deal with anyone? So really like giving these alone times to the other person. And he does the same for me. And that has helped me so much of, we don't always in the free time need to be all together because we're a family, and this always needs to be family time. But where is also really the individual time where the other person can not deal with the partner and not deal with the children and really be for themselves.
And that's like, and why with thinking about parental mental health versus just adult general mental health is that when you're just a independent adult, even within a relationship, you have much more capacity to do the things that you want to do on the time schedule that you need. And it can often, I see this a lot with new mums, particularly, of having to put their mental health needs to the side because of having a baby. And actually you're constantly negotiating that free time, things that you would have found easy to access before, knowing that there's a yoga class you could go to, but not being able to get there because you're breastfeeding a baby or whatever. And then, that going on a few months and feeling like completely depleted and overwhelmed. So all that to say is just, it's complex. It's another layer, having to negotiate time around other people with the things that might help you in your mental health.
When we're looking at the parental relationship, what kind of things can we work on to create a positive relationship with each other?
Yeah, communication, as we've spoken about, finding ways to communicate, checking in with each other, conflict. Resolution. Conflict is something that is normal and should be expected, but the way that you do conflicts as a couple is important. Like, it might be that you are a couple who have complete massive blowouts, lots of nasty words said, times where you can't talk to each other afterwards. That's more likely to make you feel stressed, overwhelmed, affect your mental health. So if there a way to have conflict nicely, I don't think nicely is the right word, to invite conflict in a positive way, in a way that gets a change, whatever change that you want to see. And that
productive, right?
Productive,
yeah.
And we could have a whole episode on this, maybe we should, but just thinking about that's often using feelings statements. I feel angry when this happens. I am sad when that happened, rather than people often think they're using feeling statements, but they're not. They might say, I feel that you don't do enough around the house. Like, there's no feeling in there. So to keep to the ways that it makes you feel can be a productive way to have conflict. Yeah, I suppose in couples, we're often thinking about sex and intimacy, and that being a really important part of relationships as well. And family life that thrives on routine, consistency, stability. That's not sexy stuff. That's not the necessarily the environment that you would have relied on pre-baby to kind of have spontaneous, fun, sex and intimacy with your partner. So to kind of, how do you integrate that difference? How do you still feel connected in that part of your relationship when you've got a new family, or even a not new family, just children and different roles and responsibilities? But again, it comes down to communication. How do you communicate that with your partner, what your wants and needs and expectations are and what theirs are in return? So sort of, I'd say communication lives as the umbrella with all of these other things underneath it.
And also lots of redefinition of predefined things. Like when you say intimacy, how can we redefine our intimacy now as a couple? Because the opportunities are not there as they were in the past, but how can we still make it work that works for both of us? Or, I mean, when we talk about sex, it's a wild, big field. And what are the other ways that we can incorporate this in different ways that we haven't done in the past, but now we have to change it, and we still can connect on this level, but now it just looks different. And I guess, coming back to communication and talking about it and exploring it together and be like, oh, does this work for you? Or, hey, what if we try that? And just letting go of these patterns that we had in the past that worked in this environment, in this context, but now we're in a different context. And how can we redefine these moments or these actions even, and find a new pattern in this new context that then works? And keep it flexible also. Okay, reassess the situation, reevaluate, put a new pattern in place. But then I tend to hold on to this, and then I don't notice that the context keeps changing and changing and changing. So keeping it then also flexible with the other factors from outside, and still keep the core intention there, I guess.
Yeah, and mental flexibility is a sort of key part of being mentally well, or having mental well-being is rolling with the punches, having the resilience to manage the stresses and the strains, and to kind of be flexible in your response to things. If you always had a one-way rigid response, that just that's not the flexibility that's needed in life, and that can make you feel really overwhelmed or low. So I think flexibility is key.
When you have couples, do they come in or do you do it online?
Depends. Either. Mostly they would come in because just physical space, it's easier to do, but I have met a couple online as well.
Because I'm just wondering, it's a case of like, can we say no couple is perfect? Everyone can benefit from even just sitting down with, like you, for example, once, just to sit down and actually work on this communication, and just to sit there and be like, oh, to provide active listening, to provide, understanding, and to help them kind of go through it, because either male or female, we all are very unique in our different ways, and some of us have restrictions on communications through our own history, our own past, our own upbringing. And it's a case of everyone can benefit from sitting down with someone like yourself to kind of then hopefully kind of open up this communication again to help them move forward.
Yeah, I mean, when we're in the system and when we're in the couple, you can't often see the wood for the trees. So that's what I think is the most helpful thing, is that you have somebody else witness your patterns that are just happening for you. He said this, she said that, she reacts that way, I said that way. You know, it's ingrained, isn't it, when you're in a couple, the way she reacts. And sometimes it can take just a third party who then help you realize yourself how you can like change the record, have a different way of doing things. And yeah, and also to understand where those patterns come from, either in your own dynamics or your family of origin. You know, why do you get stuck in these same roles and same conflicts again and again? Because always in patterns, the conflict might look different, but it's normally always got the same root. Like if you think about arguments that you've been in yourself with your partner, you're like, oh, it's this familiar thing we're doing again. It might be about the dishwasher, but it could just as easily be about your mother-in-law or something. It's often got a familiar rhythm to it and a theme. So perhaps just understanding that can be really helpful. And that's totally something you can do yourself outside of therapy as well, but it has to take a sort of a step back and a pause and not be in it.
The reason I'm asking is because there's a lot of people who are, well, very busy, one, but two, some people are kind of like, well, we don't need this, or we don't need help, or, you know, we'll be just fine. So I'm just wondering, is there something that it's a case of saying, look, just once sitting down with someone else that is unbiased, because some people can be very defensive, saying they'll take your side, or, you know, you've arranged this. And it's just a case of, is it like a possibility of saying, we just sit down once, someone observes us and tries to help us with this communication for us to move forward? Because as you say, like parents were just overwhelmed with so much happening, but this is just like a check-in to kind of be like, are we being heard? Are we communicating together here?
Yeah, I mean, that would be great, right? It's like saying for everyone's mental health, they should have therapy. Yeah, maybe that would be helpful. But oftentimes you come when things are a bit of an impasse, or something's just not feeling right, or you keep having the same arguments again and again, or, you know, you've got a child who's got additional needs for whatever reason, and you come at different points. Or quite often I see differences in disciplining children as well. And that being a big kind of sticking point that maybe feels okay when you've got a baby, but then you've got 2 kids under 5 that need different things, and it's not okay anymore. So I guess to understand those things, I mean, I could sit here as a therapist and say like everybody needs therapy, every couple does, and maybe that's true, but there's also lots that you can get from reading books about, you know, about parenting and mental health, or listening to podcasts, or having conversations with your friends. You know, there's lots of ways that you can come to the same kind of understanding, which generally, whichever way it is like taking a pause, taking a step back, seeing the wood for the trees a bit, and thinking what your next steps might be.
I think this is also a good tip because of course, when we talk about couples therapy, and therapy is also a factor of time and money. And so this is a good tip that you say there's so much free resources out there that you can go to the library and get a book about it, or you can read online, you can go on social media, you can consume. So like this whole mental health is so present that there are so many resources where you can also access this for very little money or for free. And I think this is also something that people can tap in, because often I can't afford couples therapy, or I don't have time for this, but they don't see that because it has become more present in our society, that there are other ways now to educate yourself about communication, or I don't know, like reflect on yourself. That's for free. Reflecting on yourself is always for free. You can sit down with yourself and have an honest conversation with yourself, or get a free workbook of whatever. I mean, there's so much stuff out there, but you have to utilize it.
Well, for me, I think it's just a case of right now, I think personally, I'm overwhelmed with so much out there, with all these books that are being recommended, with all these social media. I'm overwhelmed. I'd rather just sit down with Naomi and just be kind of like,
course. Yeah,
can
yeah,
I just do one session with you
Yeah.
to kind of recalibrate myself? Because it's too much.
Yeah.
There's just too much out there. And that, like, I mean, that's one of the reasons for this podcast, is a case of just trying to, you know, you have a topic you can look up on the podcast list and be like, oh, this is what I want to hear right now, instead of having to look for the book and then read through the book. And I don't know about everyone, but like I can struggle to read books, you know. Oh, I read this page, I have to go back, reread it again because I forgot about it. And so for me, that's why I'm thinking I'd rather pay to sit down and just have like an hour session and just be like, okay, it makes me feel seen and heard, and I feel like I've been productive now.
I guess this is then also priorities, because I feel that has also changed with becoming a parent, that in the past I might have put my resources or my money into this, like getting, I don't know, a new bag or a new pair of shoes or whatever, or going out to a fancy dinner, but maybe take this money, go to a therapist and invest 100 euros that you would have invested in a date night, special dinner. Let's invest this in a therapy session. And it doesn't always have to be this whole big, oh, we have to go 6 months for therapy and have to invest 1,000 euros. But sometimes this check in, or like Naomi said, this observation of a situation, and then they give you points to work on, and then you can go off for the next 6 months and work on this and then come back. And I think this is then prioritizing your mental health and putting the resources and the money into this. I think can be, I guess, money's 100 euros spent on couples therapy probably does more work for your relationship than spending the 100 euros in a restaurant.
You're investing in the relationship again.
Yeah, exactly.
Have we given you a new business there, Naomi? Start doing the once a year check-ins, come sit on the couch and we can, let's see how we go.
Yeah, no, it sounds good, but it always depends on how ingrained the problem is, right? It's sort of, we don't get into these patterns quickly, and we probably shouldn't expect to get out of them quickly either.
Yeah. But for therapy, I also find this I always go then in with the mindset of what a luxury. Someone is observing me and I get all the information about myself and about my communication, and really like translating what I want to say. And I always feel this is very relaxing for me, because then I don't have to do this translation. I can just speak my truth, and I have this other person who can then translate, oh, so do you actually want to say this, or it feels like you want to say that? And then this is the golden nuggets, that you don't have to be the one picking out the golden nuggets, but you have the therapist who can find them for you, and then you can work with them. And I find this super relaxing. That's how I sold it also to my husband. You don't have to think about anything, you just have to speak, and then they can find the nuggets and give them to us.
Yeah. Sometimes it looks like that. Sometimes it looks a little less passive and a bit more kind of you're helping to dig with the person to find the nuggets. And sometimes it's not easy to get to them, and it can feel like hard work, or maybe the nugget you find is really painful and you've got to look at that. And
I think, this is a topic that could go on for many, many, many hours, I guess. But I think we're going to wrap it up here, because it is a case of like, at the end of the day, mental health is imperative for every single human being out there. And as parents, we're trying to also instill in our own children this actual very like unmapped world where we're trying to do our best, but we're not even sure how like there's no A to Z guide of like, this is how you do it. This is how you give your child the mental health awareness and the emotional development. But I think we're coming out of this, I guess, saying that actually, no, Naomi, you tell us what would be the 3 learnings that we're actually going to come out of this? Like, what are our 3 learnings to figure out how to develop a positive relationship, and how do we keep an eye on each other in this, very imperative parental era of our lives?
So the first thing would be the communication with yourself and with your partner. How can I check in with them? How are we communicating in a way that feels productive? How are we looking after for each other in that way? Check in, communicate, connect, so that you can best help each other. We spoke about, finding time for each other, not necessarily massive expensive date nights or couples therapy or whatever, but finding moments where you can feel connected, feel seen, feel heard, feel understood, and that being a really important part of keeping yourself mentally well. Yeah, and I think another sort of learning might be that to expect there to be a change when you become a parent. I think we can often go into parenting thinking you're just going to remain 2 adults in a couple, but actually it's a massive change. You're now a triangle or a square in your family, and how you can look after yourself in that is really important. And the weight of the responsibility of growing a child and all of their needs can feel a lot sometimes. So to take a compassionate stance and go easy on yourself, and to get help where you need it.
I hope this is going to be a great little cheat sheet that we'll be able to post out as well, because I think actually you really summarized it very well there for everyone. Thank you again, Dr. Naomi Gibson. You can find her on the Good Enough Psychologist, and she has her group mom therapy. Let's see what this year is going to bring for us all. So, as we mentioned at the top of the episode, it's such a vague void nearly of a topic because it is such an expansive area of it's not applicable to everyone to go one way, or, you know, some people prefer to do something in a different way. One of the things I mentioned earlier was the 5 love languages. It's not for everyone. I'm definitely going to give you that. But it could maybe be a little help to someone out there that it's a case of, actually, I think I'm channeling love to my partner. Does my partner channel love in a different way to me? And maybe if you guys just sit down and just do these 5, you know, love language questions to figure out actually what is this to you or that to you. And like for Maren, it's the food, it's the hugs, you know, for myself, it was about quality time. You know, we are all different and we have love in different ways because of how we were reared, that's what was important to us. And so if anything, we can't answer, and Dr. Naomi cannot answer everyone's problems or issues right now. But the one thing that is really important is we're looking out for each other and we look after our partner, because at the end of the day, we are a team in raising our child, be it if you are living together or if you're separated, but keeping an eye out for each other and really taking note of each other's mental health as well. I think, Maren, you mentioned earlier about like just having time at home, like your husband having like the 2 hours for formula.
Alone. Yeah.
Formula. What's the name of that thing again?
Formula One.
There you go. I'm just thinking, I know, I'm just thinking of the baby food. But just that thing, exactly like you say, is just giving that partner 2 hours at home of peace on their own where you take it. That's exactly what we do in this household as well, is just to be like, hey, and honestly, half the time is we're just cleaning the house because it's like, hey, if you guys can leave, I can really get this done quicker or whatever it is. Or, you know, I want to watch TV or whatever it is. So even if you can identify that, I think that's at least a step towards something in figuring out your communication with each other.
Yeah. I hope that, I mean, we always try to give you 3 learnings from this episode or like identify the steps to whatever. But I think this episode is more really of a brainstorming and gathering ideas around this topic. And it's for sure, this conversation is something that we will pick up and keep on exploring, because there's really no, this is how it's done, set, finished, archive this topic kind of thing. Yeah, if that episode felt a little, explorational, then great, because that's what we wanted to try, open up the conversation, open up ideas, just gathering them, and then everyone can hopefully pick and choose what resonated with them, or maybe got an impulse to dig deeper into something that might have sparked up when you were listening. So yeah, this is one of these episodes where we don't have a plan to follow or the 3 results, but it's more of putting it out there to be explored and to be discussed, maybe even with your partner. Maybe you can pick this up and like, hey, I've listened in on this conversation today. They were talking about that. How does it resonate with you? Or what do you think about this? Maybe this can be a conversation opener episode for everyone listening.
And as always, you can go to Spotify and you can leave a message there for us about if something resonated with you. If there was a topic you want us to discuss, you can also hit us up on Instagram. It's on YouTube as well. So you can always leave comments there. If there's specific topics that you guys are wanting to talk about, you know, reach out, because at the end of the day, you know, we've got each other. And the thing is, we're trying to actually, you know, just exactly as Maren said, this is conversations, you know, and these are conversations that we want you to listen into. If you're in the cafe or whatever, you can just tap in and you might be able to take something away from these conversations. So with that, Maren's going to do her usual announcement.
So if you like this episode and if it did spark anything in you, then please make sure to like, subscribe, and share our podcast and our episodes with your friends, family, or whoever you think might benefit from the knowledge that we're putting out there. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course on Instagram, Dan Parenting Podcast. And we're super excited to hear feedback from you, or more input or questions or topics that you want us to discuss on the next episodes. We hope everyone is listening in next week, and we'll leave it at that. Hope to hear you soon. Bye.
Bye.